Hi there, welcome to my YouTube channel Dhyani classes. If you are watching my video for the first time, do subscribe my channel, hit the bell icon so that you get notified whenever new video will be uploaded. So in today's video we will cover the first part of the chapter Footprints Without Feet, written by H.G. Wells from class 10 CBSE. So let's get started. Let's talk about the theme of the lesson. The story Footprints Without Feet, written by H.G. Wells, and tells us a story of a brilliant scientist Griffin who had discovered a formula and made himself invisible. Griffin said that the human body could become transparent and invisible. During trials and experiments, he misused it to threaten, trouble, and beat innocent people and rob them. Let's talk about the author. Herbert George Wells, born on 21st September 1866, and he was an English writer. He was creative in many classifications such as writing novels, short stories, and works of social commentary, literature, biography, and autobiography, and even he wrote 2 books on recreational war games. He is now best remembered for his science fiction novels, and he is often called the father of science fiction. So Footprints Without Feet is written by H.G. Wells and tells us a story of a brilliant scientist named Griffin, and he says, can a man become invisible? So this is a story of a scientist who discovered how to make himself invisible. Does he use or misuse his discovery? He discovered a formula that can make a man invisible, but at the same time the man can be touched and felt physically. So from this lesson we will see how he uses or misuses his power for his own benefits. So let's begin with the first line of the chapter now. The 2 boys started in surprise at the fresh muddy imprints of a pair of bare feet. So here the author H.G. Wells is saying that when a scientist Griffin became invisible and ran from one place to another place from where he stayed and reached a house in London where 2 boys were there inside the house, and they got surprised when they saw muddy imprints of a pair of bare feet. That means they saw a pair of footprints in the mud without feet and were wondering from where a pair of footprints appearing. So muddy means dirty and imprints means mark or outline, and says, what was a barefooted man doing on the steps of a house in the middle of London, and where was the man? So here he says that both boys started wondering how come the footprints without feet can appear inside the house, and thought, where was the man? That means as they could not see any man coming inside the house, but still they could see the footprints of barefooted man. So barefooted means without wearing anything on the feet. And further he says, as they gazed, a remarkable sight met their eyes. That means they were looking very carefully at appearing footprint, and it was extraordinary thing for them to see footprints without feet. So gazed refers to fixing the eyes on one thing in surprise or in amusement. A fresh footmark appeared from nowhere. So as they were looking at the footprint, again footprint without feet started appearing without a man, and says, further footprints followed, one after another, descending the steps and progressing down the street. So earlier they have seen the footprints going inside the house, but this time steps of footprints without feet coming outside from the house and then getting down towards the street outside. So progressing down means to moving downward. Further he says the boys followed, fascinated, until the muddy impressions became fainter and fainter and at last disappeared altogether. So here the author is saying that the boys started following those footprints because still the man was invisible, or they could not see any person walking, and the boys were so attracted to the footprint. So they started following the footprint, and later on the footprints started becoming fainter and fainter. That means they were not able to see the footprints clearly, and then the footprint became invisible. So fainter and fainter means becoming lighter or unclear. The explanation of the mystery was really simple enough. So here the author is saying that the mystery behind footprints without feet is very simple and easy to understand, and says the bewildered boys had been following a scientist who had just discovered how to make the human body transparent. So the mystery behind footprints without feet is a scientist who had discovered a medicine in order to make human body invisible. So he consumed the medicines and became invisible, and that's the reason the bewildered boys, That means confused boys had been following a scientist who had discovered how to make the human body transparent, and says Griffin, the scientist, had carried out experiment after experiment to prove that the human body could become invisible. So here this story belongs to a scientist named Griffin, and he had been working on a formula how to make human body invisible and trying to prove that the human body could also be made invisible. So carried out refers to putting something into action or performing something. Now the author is saying finally he swallowed certain rare drugs and his body became as transparent as a sheet of glass, though it also remained as solid as glass. So finally this scientist Griffin consumed that drug which he had discovered in order to make human body invisible, and after consuming it his whole body became transparent as a sheet of glass, but his body could be touched and felt just like something hard in the air, and says brilliant scientist though he was, Griffin was rather a loveless person. So here Griffin was a very brilliant scientist because he had discovered a formula to make human body invisible, but at the same time he was a loveless person. That means he was very angry and arrogant person and used to disobey rules, and says his landlord disliked him and tried to eject him. So here the author is saying that his landlord, that means the owner of the house, disliked him because of his bad behavior and tried to eject him. That means his landlord wanted him to throw out of his house. Further he says in revenge Griffin set fire to the house. So when Griffin got to know that his landlord disliked him and trying to eject him from his house, so Griffin became very angry and burned his house and quickly ran away from there. To get away without being seen, he had to remove his clothes. So before coming out of the house, Griffin removed his clothes in order to save himself and came out of the house, and nobody could see him because at that time he was invisible. Thus it was that he became a homeless wanderer without clothes, without money, and quite invisible. So here he became invisible when he came out of the house and started roaming here and there just like a homeless person or a vagabond without clothes and money, and nobody could see him, and says until he happened to step in some mud and left footprints as he walked. So as he was walking and sometime running, suddenly he stepped in some wet mud, and that's how the mud got into his feet, and his footprints could be seen as he walked, and that's why the two boys got surprised to see footprints without feet and following Griffin wherever he walked. He escaped easily enough from the boys who followed his footprints in London. So here finally he was able to run away from the boys who were following his footprints in London, and says but his adventures were by no means over. That means his journey of becoming invisible did not end at all, and many things had happened with him, and says he had chosen a bad time of the year to wander about London without clothes. It was midwinter. So here the author is saying that in order to do trials and experiments, Griffin had chosen bad weather or bad season of the year to become invisible because it was midwinter and it was very hard for him to roam here and there without clothes around the city. The air was bitterly cold and he could not do without clothes. So here the author is saying that it was very cold when the scientist decided to do experiments and trials, and due to bitterly cold he was unable to go anywhere without clothes, and says instead of walking about the streets he decided to slip into a big London store for warmth. So due to cold he decided to go into one of the London store so that he could get some clothes and would warm his body, because at that time he was invisible and he took off all his clothes. Further he says closing time arrived, and as soon as the doors were shut, Griffin was able to give himself the pleasure of clothing and feeding himself without regard to expense. So here as he was roaming around the street and it was the closing time of the stores, and he thought this is the best time to sneak inside the store. So he was able to go inside the store as soon as the doors were shut, and he found some warm clothes there and food easily. So he took advantage of being invisible and nobody could see him when he entered inside the store. He broke open boxes and wrappers and fitted himself out with warm clothes. So here author is saying that as he was feeling very cold, and in order to give some warm himself, he broke boxes and took out some clothes and fitted himself out with warm clothes. That means he wore whatever clothes he found to keep himself warm. Further, he says soon with shoes, an overcoat, and a wide brimmed hat, he became a fully dressed and visible person. So here, when he broke boxes, he got complete outfit along with the pair of shoes and a wide brimmed hat. That means a large wide hat with a round stripe on it. And after wearing these clothes, he became fully dressed and visible person. That means at that time anybody could see him when he was inside the store. And says in the kitchen of the restaurant he found cold meat and coffee, and he followed up the meal with sweets and wine taken from the grocery store. So here, when he went to the kitchen of the restaurant, he was able to find some food such as cold meat and coffee along with the sweets and wine which he had taken from the grocery store. And says finally he settled down to sleep on the pile of quilts. So after having his food, he decided to take some rest, and then he found a heap of bed sheets and blankets, and then he slept on the pile of blankets. If only Griffin had managed to wake up in good time, all might have been well. So here the author is saying that as he was feeling very tired and feeling very cold, so due to warmness, he could not able to wake up early in the morning. And he was supposed to wake up early in the morning because at that time he was fully dressed and visible man. So if he had woken up early in the morning, everything would have been well, but then something had happened with him. As it was, he did not wake up until the assistants were already arriving next morning. So here the author is saying that as he was sleeping and did not wake up early in the morning and kept sleeping, and before he could wake up, the employees or the workers started arriving into the store. When he saw a couple of them approaching, he panicked and began to run. So here, as soon as he woke up, he saw a few people were approaching towards him, and then he became frightened and tried to run away from the store, and then they naturally gave chase. That means the workers thought that he was a thief, and as soon as Griffin started to run, they chased him. That means they started following him. In the end, he was able to escape only by quickly taking off his newly found clothes. So here he was frightened and panicked, and as he was running, and while running, he quickly took off his clothes, and then he was able to escape from the workers easily. So once more he found himself invisible but naked in the chill January air. So here the author is saying that again he became invisible because he took off all his clothes and started roaming without clothes in chill January air, and again he was feeling very cold. So in this picture you can see how shopkeepers are chasing Griffin, and Griffin is running outside from the store, and at that time he was wearing clothes but his body was invisible, and then while running he took off all his clothes and became invisible again. Further he says this time he decided to try to stock up a theatrical company in the hope of finding not only clothes but also something that would hide the empty space above his shoulders. So hereafter, escaping from the store, he decided to try to stock up a theatrical company. That means he wanted to go to that place where actors play live performances or stage shows, dance activities, role play, etc. So in order to play different type of roles, and they uses different types of dresses. So Griffin thought if he go there, he would get some clothes because it was bitterly cold, and also it will be very helpful for him to hide the empty space above his shoulders. That means he wanted to hide his face and head also. Shivering with cold, he hurried to Drury Lane, the center of theatre world. So he started walking towards Drury Lane as he was shivering with a cold. That means he was feeling very cold and his whole body was shaking, and he reached the center of the theatre world. That means he reached a building or place where stage performances are given. Further he says he soon found a suitable shop. So finally he found a good costume shop and went inside of it, and says he made his way invisible upstairs and came out a little later wearing bandages round his forehead, dark glasses, false nose, big bushy side whiskers and a large hat. So here, as he was invisible and he went inside the shop, he went upstairs and found clothes as per his needs, such as bandages, dark glasses, false nose, big bushy side whiskers and a large hat. So he took all these necessary items and clothes and covered the empty space above his shoulder using bandages, and he wore dark glasses and fixed false nose and big bushy side whiskers on his face. That means he wore artificial facial hair that has grown down the side of a man's face in front of the ears. Further, he says to escape without being seen, he callously attacked the shopkeeper from behind, after which he robbed him of all the money he could find. So here author is saying that when he all set to escape without being seen, he callously attacked the shopkeeper from behind. That means he hit hard the shopkeeper in a cruel manner from behind, and then he stole all the money he found in a cash drawer. Eager to get away from crowd London, he took a train to the village of Epping, where he booked 2 rooms at the local inn. So after stealing money, he quickly ran away from the shop as well as the crowded street from London, and reached the train station and took a train from there to a village named Epping, and in that village he booked 2 rooms at the local inn. That means he booked 2 rooms in a local hotel or guest house in the village Epping. The arrival of a stranger at an inn in winter was in any case an unusual event. So here people of the village got surprised to see stranger arrival of a visitor, especially in winter, was an unusual event. That means people mostly visit this place during the summer season for refreshment, and says a stranger of such uncommon appearance set all tongues wagging. That means when people saw this person with a strange appearance, they got surprised because he was wearing bandages on his face with an artificial nose and with big bushy side whiskers, and he wore dark glasses, and all he was looking very different and strange. And then people started talking to each other while looking at his strange physical appearance. So this is the end of the first part of the chapter, Footprints Without Feet. Let's look at the second part of the chapter in my next video. For more informative videos, do subscribe my channel. Hit the bell icon so that you get notified whenever new video will be uploaded. So thank you so much for watching once again. Stay safe, stay healthy.